This is the sermon for January 9th, 2022, and I'm reading from Matthew 25:31 through 46. When he finally arrives, blazing in beauty and all the angels with him, the Son of a Woman will take his place on a glorious throne. Then all the nations will be arranged before him, and he will sort the people out, much as a shepherd sorts out sheep and goats, putting sheep to his right and goats to his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Enter, you who are blessed by my Father. Take what's coming to you in this kingdom. It's been ready for you since the world's foundation. And here's why. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was homeless, and you gave me a room. I was shivering, and you gave me clothes. I was sick, and you stopped to visit. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then those sheep are going to say, "Master, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry and feed you, thirsty, give you a drink? And when did we ever see you sick or in prison and come to you?" Then the king will say, "I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me." Then he will turn to the goats, the one that is left, and say, "Get out, worthless goats. You're good for nothing. And why? Because I was hungry, and you gave me no meal. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was homeless, and you gave me no bed. I was shivering, and you gave me no clothes. Sick and in prison, and you never visited me." Then those goats are going to say, "Master, what are you talking about? When did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or homeless or shivering or sick or in prison and didn't help?" He will answer them, "I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you failed to do one of these things to someone who was being overlooked or ignored, that was me. You failed to do it to me." Then those goats will be herded to their eternal doom, but the sheep to their eternal reward. Well, it's a remarkable passage. It only appears in Matthew, and it looks like a black and white works righteousness kind of thing. Do mercy, do good, go to heaven. Don't do mercy, don't do good, go to hell. That's what the passage looks like. But really, there's a great sense of humor, and we move from Jesus, son of a woman, or typically the human one, and then suddenly it's a shepherd, and then suddenly it's a king. And so it's hard to even follow what's happening in the thing, but there is meant to be a wisdom teaching in it, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But first I want to tell you the story of Linus and Lucy. And Linus, 7-year-old Linus, is watching television. Lucy comes into the room and says, "I don't want to watch this program. I want to watch my program." And Linus just wants to be left alone. So he says, "All right, I'll just go listen to the radio." And Lucy follows him and says, "I don't want to listen to this radio program. I want to listen to my radio program." And Linus says, "Okay, I'll just go in the next room and listen to some records." Lucy follows him in the next room and says, "I don't want to listen to these records. I want to listen to my records." And Linus, getting exasperated, says, "All right, I'm just going to go out and look at the stars." And so what does Lucy do? She follows him outside and she starts to say, "I don't want to look at those stars. I want to look at my..." And then she realizes she doesn't have any stars. Nobody can say, "I want to look at my stars." That would be ridiculous. The stars belong to everyone evenly. And so Linus is pointing Lucy to the eternal mysteries. And Lucy is trying to hold on to the world's way of doing things, which is her own way, which is ego, which is my way or the highway. When confronted with the stars, she can no longer do that. That's how I feel when I look at the wonder of nature, is I can no longer cling on to my ego and my way or the highway. I am stunned by the wonder of nature and of beauty. And so we have two different things here. We have the goats and the sheep, and we have the king saying, when you helped the least, the last, and the lost, you helped me, which is a completely crazy reversal. When is a king in need? And that you're supposed to ask that when you hear this. Sheep and goats, sure. Shepherd, sure. But really, it's about a king being in need. And both the sheep and the goats are stunned. They can't make sense out of the fact that a king was ever in need. And when did they ever help a king or not help a king? It's a ridiculous notion. And so it isn't meant to be taken literally as a works righteousness thing. And so I wanted to hold the two side by side, which I know is asking a lot on a morning, on a Sunday morning when some of us would rather be still in bed. But we have our way, the world's way, the ego way, the selfish way, and then we have God's way, which is the wonder and, the beauty of the stars, and it's opening it up to everybody, and it's no longer self-centered. It's a vast understanding of the fabric of all of creation being a part of God's creation, God's wonder, God's love. And it belongs to everybody, right? So then why are we focusing on what we want and how we're important and those other people aren't? And that's what the parable plays into. The important people know what's important, and that's me, that's us, that's those that are mine, and it's what I consider important. And the goats, it's the people that are in need. Like my parents used to say, for those that didn't care for the poor, it was, let the hind end drag. We watch out for our own and let the hind end drag. Just not that important. And so I think the parable is a wake-up call, much like Linus and Lucy. For Lucy, it's a wake-up call that nobody can say, these stars are my stars. And so Linus is pointing to the greater reality. It's all God's reality. The fabric of all of creation, including every human being, is God's creation. It isn't about us. It isn't about what we want. It isn't about what we claim. It isn't about me, my, and mine. Ours, me, mine. Instead, it's looking at the wonder of all of creation. And so I invite you to read this passage from Matthew 25 again, and on your own during the week, and to look at, people think, well, I've got it figured out. This is the people who belong to God. These are the ones who matter. The others, not so much. And so both the sheep and the goats in the parable don't know what they've done or not done. Well, that's because all of creation is God's creation. And so we think of ourselves as the saved, as the important. We are not part of the least, the last, and the lost. I think of, is it Brazil, where people that are outcast make their living by picking through acres and acres of garbage. In a way, the king is right alongside these people who live in a dump and who pick through the garbage to try to find things either to eat that are safe, or to sell, or to keep, or to use, or whatever. And the king is right alongside them. It is meant to be a shocking parable. And so how do we put ourselves in either those who are considered important or those who are considered the dump pickers? Where do we put ourselves? In the middle class, we tend to put ourselves among the important. But I know my failings. I know that in reality, although I forget it, I'm part of the least, the last, and the lost. And yet, all of it is God's creation. All of it is all part of the fabric. So we share the same reality with those who are the most poor. So how can we not care for the least, the last, and the lost? How can we not do for those in need? It's only in our culture, in a self-centered culture that says, I'm what matters. And we see it in politics all the time. I'm taking care of my constituents. I don't care about the rest. I'm taking care of those with money. I'm taking care of what I care about. And the rest, let them figure it out. And that's why my parents used to say, let the hind end drag. So this parable is about all of God's reality is one fabric. We all belong to it. We are all those that are important, and we are all the least, the last, and the lost. We all are in need. We all are right alongside the King who says, I was in need, and you gave me a drink of water. I was homeless, and you gave me a room and a bed. And we're all part of it together. So this parable is wisdom calling out in the streets, calling out saying, embrace the wholeness, the fullness of life. It's all God's. It's all God's creation. It's God's life. It's God's mercy. It's God's reality. And we're all part of it. I believe in God's steadfast love, in Hesed, in womb love God, the womb love of God for everyone, because who knows when I'll be in need? Who knows when I'll be among the poorest and those who are destitute? So how can I not care? If I have the ability, how can I not care for those who are in need? So Jesus starts his story with sheep and with goats. They're all surprised. Everyone in that play is surprised. And yet God knows what's going on. We all belong to each other. We all belong to God. And because of that, we'll care for one another. Amen.